Hello everyone, this is part 7 of What If Naruto Was Abandoned But Found Someone, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Ino awoke from her slumber to the sound of several voices in her house. Wincing against the sunlight filtering in through the window, she pulled a pillow over her head in an effort to drown out the voices. No go. Her demonic senses were so elevated that the pillow wasn't doing anything but reducing it a couple decibels. Her ears pricked up when she heard the distinct demonized timbre coming from several of the voices. No doubt about it, that was Genmaki and his fox brethren, her subjects. With a small growl of frustration, she flung the covers back and threw on a robe. After tearing a small hole in the back so that her tails could poke through, she walked into the living room. The sight of several different colored foxes and humans all conversing with each other was quite a sight. Sakura was giving a hungover Tsunade a cup of coffee while reprimanding her for drinking so heavily. Tsunade's vulpine companion was whining piteously and trying to cover her ears. She had never imbibed alcohol before and she wasn't taking it as well as Tsunade. Ino, upon seeing this, knelt beside Penny and put her fingertips to the fox's temples while emitting a small amount of chakra to relieve her pain. A small purr of contentment escaped the fox's tea and Ino smiled as she stood again. Penny looked up at her queen and bowed her head. Thank you, Lady Ino. That was quite a painful experience. Such a pleasant drink should not have such an unpleasant after effect. I don't think I shall be trying it again anytime soon. That's good, Penny. Try to get Tsunade to ease up as well. We need her sober more often than not. Of course. Tsunade, don't be a bad influence to my people. I don't want a bunch of fuzzy alcoholics stumbling around. Shut up, Ino. I have a headache. Ino just shook her head and sighed. She scanned the rest of the room and watched as the children played with Shin, who was weaving in and out between them in a small game of tag. Megumi sat on a couch off to the side with Genmaki beside her, both watching with the equivalent of a small smile on their faces. Jin had drug a table with a shogi board on it off to the side and was now trying to coax a hangover-free Penny into a game. Hikaru had finally tackled Shin and they were engaged in a tussle that nearly broke one of her vases. Ino's eye twitched in annoyance. Hikaru knew better than to rehouse in the house. Uzumaki Hikaru. Take your outside if you want to play rough. Jugo, Karen, Shin, that goes for you too. Now go play outside. 4 choruses of, yes ma'am, were heard and footsteps sounded their retreat to safer ground. Squeal of joy were heard soon after and Ino looked outside to see Karen riding Shin like a horse while Jugo and Hikaru tried to catch him. She smiled and made her way into the kitchen for a cup of coffee. She sighed as she took the first sip. Ever since her demonic birth, everything had become more vibrant, more alive. Hell, even a morning cup of coffee could almost be icy through taste alone. Realizing that Tsunade still hadn't bonded with Penny, she decided to get that over with. After a brief recollection of how to do it, she got the older woman and the reluctant fox to see their respective appendages. While that went on, she went back to her coffee until she felt Genmaki's eyes on her. Yes, Genmaki. How can I help you? I am sorry, Lady Ino. I should have come sooner or done something sooner about the Uchiha. The Guardians would not be necessary if I had eliminated him when I thought it best. And do you think Naruto would have allowed you to do such a thing? I don't know, Lady Ino. It's just, I feel I could have done more. Tsunade had been listening to them while Sakura healed her hangover and decided to put her 2 cents in. Naruto isn't the type to K needlessly, Genmaki. I know you would do anything to protect Hikaru and your new charges, but you have to realize you can't be there forever and you can't be there all the time. Hikaru is a resourceful little boy and with that fighting style Naruto and Lee are teaching him, he'll be a force to be reckoned with. Speaking of which, shouldn't he be joining the academy soon? Sakura nodded. Yes, he'll be joining at the start of the year. I just hope that Sasuke doesn't try to do anything unnecessary. He'd better hope he doesn't. I'll K him myself. You'd better go watch the children, Genmaki. Megumi has already gone outside. Of course, Lady Ino. Once Genmaki was gone, Ino turned back to Sakura and Tsunade and took another sip of her coffee. She sighed and set the cup back on the table. It was part of mine and Naruto's plan to have me be Hikaru's Junin sensei when he graduated. He is already Genin level though and probably low Chunin. Tsunade looked up from her morning paper and blew some hair out of her face. So, what's the problem? He'll graduate no problem, we all know that. Yes, but I want Juugo and Karen on my team as well. I want them all where I can watch them at all times. Besides, I'm the best teacher for them all and Naruto knows enough about the Sharingan to at least help them along if they unlock it. I want Hikaru to wait until we have Juugo and Karen up to Genin level. It shouldn't take long, especially with academy requirements being as low as they are. Kawarimi, Abunshin, and Henja aren't that difficult and I'm sure that Sasuke forced history on Juugo and Karen. Yes, Naruto used to read her story to Hikaru before I left. He's very knowledgeable. I think Naruto wanted him to be prepared and not have the education that he had when he was younger. Tsunade laid the paper on the table and tapped her finger on her chin. Well, let's go down and see what the children know. If we get an accurate assessment, perhaps we can have them all graduated by next year and continue to keep them training until they are ready for missions. Ino clapped her hands and began to walk away to get dressed. Yes, let's do that. At least we can set things in motion while Naruto's away. I think we'll all be pleasantly surprised by their advancement, especially Hikaru's. Sakura, however, had misgivings about the situation. But what about Sasuke? Would he allow the children to all be put on the same team? He is driven by pride. As long as there is no underlying motive that he senses, he shouldn't have a problem with it. Getting Iruka to make the suggestion that they would all make a good team would push things along. Besides, all that is necessary really is the test. As long as we find out what the curriculum would be, then we can grill the children on what to expect. Sakura sighed and put her head in her hands. But we don't want other children thinking that our kids are privileged just because they didn't have to go through the academy. Tsunade, what's the shortest period of time that a student can go that would allow him to graduate? At least one full term. Anything less isn't allowed. So, 6 months. MMMHMMM. We've got our work cut out for us. Let me get dressed and we'll get started today. After a brief tussle, the 3 youngsters were rounded up and made to stand at attention. Tsunade bent down to their level and smiled her brightest. Okay kiddies, we have a proposition for you. Since Hikaru is the oldest, he should be attending the academy soon. Hikaru, how old are you now? I'm 8, but I'm going to turn 9 soon. You should have already started the academy, but that's not important. What is important is that we want all of you on the same team, so we're going to have to bring your skills up to academy standards. Hikaru, let's see what you can do. I'm going to create a cage bunshin and I want you to fight it in a taijutsu match, okay? Okay grandma. Tsunade made the appropriate hand signs and a copy of her popped into existence. Hikaru took his stance, legs slightly bent and his hands at his side, with fingers crooked. Tsunade dropped her hand to signal the match beginning and Hikaru sprang into action. He ran straight for the clone, his body low to the ground and made as if to sweep her legs out from under her. The clone leapt into the air and he pushed off the ground with his hands. The clone blinked in surprise when Hikaru went to plant his feet into her stomach, but caught his legs and swung him back toward the ground. Hikaru caught himself on the ground with a handstand and began to twirl, kicking out with his feet while walking forward on his hands. Tsunade's clone was trying its best to keep the unorthodox little boy from landing a decisive blow, but it was becoming increasingly hard. He wouldn't give an inch, and if his taijutsu was an indicator, then Naruto had taught him well. The clone decided to see what he would do if he was pushed back and sent a punch toward him. His response was to grab hold of her hand and swing around her arm to try a kick at her face. There was no doubt the boy had talent. The clone grabbed his ankle and held him upside down while he flailed and squirmed, before crossing his arms in a pout. The women all laughed at him and the clone sat him down before dispersing. Very good Hikaru. I didn't expect you to actually hit the clone of course, but you did well nonetheless. That taijutsu style is very unique. Who taught it to you? Uncle Lee taught me the basics of Goken and then Dad taught me flexibility and unpredictability. I combined the two and made my own fighting style. Uncle Lee was very impressed. I see. And what did you decide to call it? I didn't name it, but Uncle Lee called it freeform. He said it described it perfectly. I just know it works. Of course you do, dear. Now then, can you do any ninjutsu or genjutsu? I can perform a cloaking genjutsu and I can dispel most. I know a few ninjutsu that daddy taught me. Such as, Cage Bunshin, Kawarimi. I can do the henge pretty well. I guess that qualifies as a genjutsu though. I can do a few Suten jutsu and a couple of Futen jutsu as well. Dad won't let me try the Rasengan yet though. With good reason. You don't have the chakra capacity for that yet. You will eventually though. Has Jiraiya been teaching you anything? No. Dad said he'd just try to use me to get women to like him, so I can't train alone with him. Your dad is pretty smart for an idiot. Alright then, Hikaru, you're through. Juugo, come here. Hikaru sat down beside Genmaki and Juugo stepped forward. Tsunade asked him what he could do. Well, father was teaching me the Uchiha style of taijutsu, but it was hard and I couldn't do it right. He wouldn't teach me anything else, so I'm not very good at taijutsu. Didn't Sakura try to teach you a taijutsu style? Mama wasn't allowed to teach us. Is this true, Sakura? An affirmative nod was her answer and Tsunade scowled. If Juugo wasn't proficient in a style, then it would be easy to find a style for him. They'd need to get Lee involved since he knew so many. Karen likely wasn't much better off. Okay, what about genjutsu or ninjutsu? Father wouldn't teach me until I mastered the taijutsu style. Well, we'll start work on you later today, okay honey? Juugo nodded and walked back to his mother quite forlorn. He hadn't felt this helpless for quite a while. Tsunade asked Sakura if Karen had even been trained yet. She was told no. The women all sighed. This was going to be difficult. They had to get a 6-year-old and a soon-to-be 5-year-old up to speed and academy standards. Since Hikaru was up to standards already, they decided to start on the other two. Sakura and Tsunade took Karen while Ino and Hikaru took Juugo. Their respective guardians followed. Karen stood timidly, not really knowing what to do. Sakura wasn't sure how they were going to break through her daughter's shyness, but perhaps Tsunade could do something. Tsunade put both hands on her hips and broke into one of her tried and true inspirational speeches. Karen, you can't afford to be shy and weak and timid anymore. You're a big girl now and you're going to have to start acting like it. I don't want any crying or sniveling while we train. Do you understand? Sakura's look was not a happy one after that little speech, but it was near close enough to the one Tsunade had given her years ago. Megumi and Shin didn't look very happy either. Tsunade was about to say more, when Shin strode forward and sat down on his haunches, looking Karen right in the eye. Listen to me, little one. The world is not a pretty place sometimes and we have to do things that we don't want to do. Fighting is one of them. Now, I wish you and me could play all day long, but we have to make it so that you can play at least sometimes. Fighting is the world you were born into and there is no escaping that. It's in your B. Karen looked like she was about to cry and began to sniffle. But I don't want to get hurt. Then we will have to make it where you won't get hurt, little one. We'll have to train and train until you can't be beat. Do not fear. I'll be right beside you the whole time. Karen wiped her eyes and looked up with hope-filled eyes. You promise. I promise. Tsunade and Sakura watched the event with small smiles on their faces. Perhaps Shin was a good guardian after all. He was already able to instill hope into the small girl. Karen turned to Tsunade and Sakura and bowed before them. Mama, Lady Tsunade, I am prepared to train. Show me what you can. I'll try to learn as best as I can. Well said, little one. Tsunade took a deep breath and looked at Karen. All right, from this day forward you will train with your mother and me. We will train you in our style and teach you chakra control. Tell me, can you sense your chakra yet? I think I can. Try to mold some for me. Karen put her hands in the ram sign and focused on calling forth her chakra. Tsunade and Sakura watched with bated breath as a small puff of dust began to swirl around her feet, signifying her chakra was indeed open. They smiled at this. Teaching her would be a lot easier now. Alright sweetie, let's start with taijutsu. We'll work on henge, kawarimi, and bunshin later. We need to get your reserves up first. Juugo, meanwhile, was already on his way. He had unlocked his chakra and Ino had decided to start on chakra control exercises. This didn't sit well with the hyperactive child since he wanted to start on taijutsu. Ino was quick to nip rebelliousness in the bud. With a whack over the head that Hikaru winced, she laid down her law. Now see here, young man, I am your sensei here, and you will do as I say. Let me tell you what Naruto had to do in his training and we'll see if I'm not being lenient with you. Oh yeah, I bet it's not nearly as hard as what you're making me do. His master threw him off a cliff. Do or s. Juugo looked at her wide-eyed and went back to trying to make the leaf stick to his forehead. He'd rather do this all day than be chunked off a cliff. He watched as Hikaru stood off to the side, going slowly through some katas. He didn't like it that Hikaru was so much better than him. Ino frowned and whacked him on the head again. Don't lose your concentration and don't be jealous of Hikaru. He's older than you and his father is quite the driver when he wants to be. We don't know what style of taijutsu would be right for you, so we'll get Naruto to find one for you when he gets back. In the meantime, I want you to focus on chakra control and then we'll start on jutsu. I'm going to start making you and your sister wear weights all the time. We're going to make you kids strong. Juugo just nodded his head and concentrated on the leaf. His life wouldn't be so easy anymore, it seemed. Just when things seemed to not get any worse, Jin popped up. In your spare time, I will also be training the three of you in strategy and patience, along with Penny. You will learn strategy by playing Go and Shogi and reviewing old battles and giving your assessment of them. Patience will be learned over time by being patient. I'll have to think of exercises for you. Lady Ino, is this all permissible? Of course it is. Anything to help them get stronger. Hikaru could use a dose of humility and patience as well. Mom, it's true. You inherited your impatience from your father. Yeah, well, Dad says that you weren't exactly known for patience yourself. You leave me out of this, young man. Juugo, you keep concentrating. Hikaru, keep doing those katas. Both boys grumbled while the foxes sat and smirked. It was so fun, children. Naruto had walked his entire kingdom by now and had met a good many of his people. He had to mind the time here since it was slower than in the mortal realm. He'd been here a half day already, meaning a day had gone by there. It would be difficult to balance the time needed here and there, but he'd manage. He always did. He just hoped that everything was going smoothly over there. Sighing heavily, he called the Fox Council together for a brief meeting. Thank you all for coming. Tell me, who are our allies? The foxes all looked at each other and the elder spoke as always. We have no allies, Lord Naruto. We are quite isolated from the rest of the demon realms. We've never had the need for allies. Well, I'm going to ally us with the toads and the slugs at least. The monkeys and snakes if I can. They are all allied with Konoha as we are, and I believe it would be beneficial if something ever came up. Have there ever been wars between any of the demon realms? Oh, of course. We rarely ever got involved though. The other demons feared the Kyuubi and his ferocious nature. Why do you wish for allies though? I have ties to the toads from my mortal years and the slugs are contracted to my ex-wife. The monkeys I believe were under contract to a man I considered my grandfather, and the snakes I want on our side in case Uchiha Sasuke, the Hokage, tries anything funny. I don't want to have to fight them if I can avoid it. This sounds like a good idea. The council approves. Who will you contact first? The toads. I believe I'll invite Gamabunta and his children here for a visit. I still owe him a drink of sake from when I first signed the contract with him. Do you know the way to the Toad Realm? Hi, we do. It runs along our northern border. Would you like to send a messenger to invite them? Please do. Gamakichi wanted to visit our land anyway. I know this will be beneficial. The Fox Council bowed and went to find a swift messenger to deliver their invitation. It would be a momentous occasion for the Fox Realm. They hadn't had visitors from another realm for eons. Their new king certainly knew how to stir things up. Naruto sat on the steps leading to the throne and put his head in his hands. Staring out at nothing, his thoughts were elsewhere. I wonder how the kids' training is going. Wonder if I'll be any help at all. Ino growled in frustration. It was difficult picking a taijutsu style for the Uchiha children. Neither one conformed to what the normal style was for an Uchiha, and Naruto wasn't due back for another 4 days. Karen, especially, was a difficult case. It seemed the Uchiha B ran strong in the both of them as their chakra control was coming along nicely. Juugo could already perform a henge, and Karen was fast on her way to being able to do that as well. Taijutsu was never Ino's forte though, and Sakura and Tsunde's style was more of a brawling type of fighting. Hikaru was trying to help where he could, but his freeform style was tailor-made for him only. Even with Sharingan, it would be difficult to copy since it depended on flexibility and unorthodox movements that never melded together in a certain pattern. One move could always flow into the next, and that's what made it so unpredictable. Juugo had tried it, but was too stiff for the workings of it. Karen had better luck, but that was only because as a female she was more lithe and limber than her brother. Ino sighed and turned to look at Tsunade and Sakura, who were sipping tea and making small talk while the children played with the foxes. A sudden growl from Jin made them all look his way, and they saw him stalk away from the shogi board, leaving a smirking Penny. Did you win again? Yes. As good as Jin is against a normal opponent, he is nowhere in my league. Is this Shikamaru I was told about around? I would like a strong opponent. I'll try to get him here. Perhaps this would be a good chance for the children to see how strategy between two master players works as well. I agree. The children could stand to learn from anything we are willing to teach. I would like to begin teaching them how to play soon. While they might not be a challenge now, they could prove a challenge later, and having a logical mind never hurts. Yes, I know. Shikamaru was on my team at one time. The guy is a genius. You'll be impressed, I promise. I hope so. As Shikamaru sat in his office, he suddenly sneezed. He glared down at the paperwork he was working on and wiped his nose. Troublesome papers. I knew I was allergic to this S. A small blue fox arrived in the swamp that was home to the toads. He looked around cautiously, not really liking the atmosphere. He much preferred the open fields and forests of his homeland. He narrowed his gaze and shook his head. The scroll he carried was a personal invite for the chief toad and his children to attend a dinner with the Kyuubi. He couldn't afford to slack off now. Worming his way through the swamp by leaping from stump to stump, he finally came upon a mountain that had mist swirling about it. He made to begin to climb when an enormous toad carrying a battleaxe leapt from nowhere and landed in front of him. The blue fox let out a squeak and lowered his ears. The toad looked at the diminutive creature in front of him and bellowed. Well, what have we here? A fox outside its territory. Tell me, furry one, have you lost your way, or do the vulpine intend to invade? The blue fox glared and set the scroll down in front of its paws. I come in the name of the vulpine and our new king to offer an invitation to your chief, Gamabunta. In this scroll are the words of our new Kyuubi. He would see your master soon. And who is the new Kyuubi? I had heard a rumor that the old one had finally perished. The new Kyuubi is Uzumaki Naruto. The toad began to sputter and spit, its eyes bugging out. The fox thought it had said something wrong until the toad began to bellow with laughter. So, Naruto is the new Kyuubi. Damn, that boy is full of surprises. Never met him myself, but he's a goddamn legend in the toad realm. Gamabunta speaks highly of him, and Gamakichi is like a brother to him. I'll deliver your message personally, Foxy. If it's all the same to you, I was supposed to make sure the message got there myself. Fair enough. Follow me and try to keep up. The toad began to leap from plateau to plateau up the mountain, the fox always just a step behind him. Near the top they came upon Gamabunta, talking to the toad's ear. And what is this, may I ask? A messenger from the foxes. To what do I owe the honor? My lord Gamabunta, my lord Uzumaki Naruto wishes an audience with you at your convenience. Gamabunta smirked and took a long drag on his pipe. So the brats finally got around to calling his old boss to dinner, eh? Tell that little runt that I'll be there in a few days. Of course, my lord. He says to bring your children as well. Ah, thank you. Gamakichi and Gamatatsu will be pleased to know they can come. You may go now and thank you. As you wish. The little blue fox sped off, wanting to get home to green grass and green trees. Gamabunta took another drag on his pipe and looked off toward his southern border. So you really did it, huh? Guess I'll see what you've done with the place soon enough. Blowing the smoke out slowly, Bunta smiled. That Naruto never ceases to amaze him. Naruto had a lot of work ahead of him. He had received word from his messenger that Gamabunta would be arriving in a few days. Of course, the silly toad never said when. He'd just have to be prepared to eat whenever. He sighed and looked off in the direction of where he'd sent a messenger to Katsuyu. She was nice and probably wouldn't refuse an invitation, especially from someone she had saved in earlier years. His sensitive ears picked up the sound of feet padding toward him, and he looked over his shoulder to see a red fox with his tongue lolling out, panting heavily. I was able to make it to Lady Katsuyu in time, my lord. She accepted your gracious invitation and said she would come in a few days. HMPH, a few days must be some kind of code between bosses. I'll have to learn that. I bet you that they all show up at the same time. Anyways, how did her realm look? Lady Katsuyu's realm is very green, greener than ours. It's a veritable jungle with all kinds of slugs and their kin lazing about. They aren't a very productive people. I see. She'll still be a valuable ally. Have you seen your brother that I sent to talk to Handra? No, my lord. I hope he is all right though. The snakes aren't known for tactfulness. At least Manda wasn't. I notice you didn't call him Lord Manda. Any reason for that? I never considered him worthy of respect. The only reason he climbed that high in the ranks was because he was the biggest and strongest. Not to mention the meanest. I believe he demanded human S when he was summoned. Yes, I've heard something along those lines. He was not an honorable beast. It was for the best that he S, I suppose, K by his own summoner no less. Well, I have to go check in with the council before I go back to the mortal realm. I'm putting you in charge of coming to get me when the others arrive. Oh, and let me know when your brother gets back. I want to be sure that he is safe. You're a strange one, my lord. The old QB wouldn't have cared if we made it back, so long as the message was passed. And that's where we differ greatly. I do care. I hate the senseless S of B in life. Now go enjoy yourself. Watch for your brother. The fox nodded and ran off back toward the village. Naruto sighed and followed after. He didn't really mind the council in this world. They weren't as biased as the one in the mortal realm, but he still had a few wrinkles to iron out. The council was supposed to be the right hand of the monarch, but if they had their own agendas, then that didn't work for the people. He'd have to keep his eyes open for any corruption. He turned his eyes skyward and put his hands in his pockets. He couldn't wait to bring Ino here in due time. He looked back down when he felt himself bump into something and heard the snickers of the foxes around him. He had walked right into the pillar of the palace without noticing. He glanced back sheepishly at the foxes who were trying to hold in their laughter and stuck his tongue out before darting inside. All who were holding back laughter exploded into a cacophony of gasps and guffaws. Their regent was a strange one indeed. The council was assembled in front of the steps leading to the throne and were all tapping their tails impatiently. They had been told to gather nearly a half hour ago and had yet to see neither hide nor hair of the monarch. Hinamori and Kazuma nodded to him as he walked past, and he gave them a wide grin. Usually, in the world of Kanids, the baring of teeth was a sign of aggression. Working with humans, however, had led to a new level of expression with the mouth. They had found, over the years, that a slight curling of the mouth or a twitch of the lips meant a lot to the person receiving your gaze. Naruto flopped down on the top step, as was his custom, and waved his hand, signaling for them to begin. The elder bowed and spoke up. My lord, your meeting with the other chiefs is in a few days. We trust that you have a plan on getting an alliance with them. Nah, not really. I always preferred just going in blind and making up a plan as I went along. Well, it is your right, even though I don't agree. We'll leave that topic alone for the moment though. On to other matters. Your schedule between our realm and the mortal realm is a tenuous one. How do you propose we handle the situation when you are gone? I expect you three to be here in my stead, taking care of problems and listening to what the people need. While I am gone, I want you to get things ready for my little get-together with the other bosses. Any more business? Yes. One last thing. The people wish to see more of you during the day. This will require you to walk among them, get to know them. This is a deviation from our last ruler, but a pleasant one, I believe. We will wait until after your meeting to see where our next order of business will lead. You can count on us to take care of the day-to-day business in the realm. By your leave. Yes, that sounds good. You may all go now. I thank you all for cooperating. Now I have somewhere to be. I'm sure my wife is wondering where I am. 3 chuckles from the gathered council echoed through the halls as Naruto puffed out of existence. There was much to do before a gathering of bosses. Ino sat at the table, her temples. The training for the children was at a standstill as far as taijutsu was concerned. Chakra control was going well, but only Hikaru was doing well in taijutsu. She was broken out of her thoughts when she heard a poof behind her and a pair of muscular arms wrapped around her shoulders. She leaned back into the embrace as far as she could and sighed happily. Welcome home, we missed you. I missed you too. So, how have things been going? Horrible. Juugo and Karen need training in taijutsu, and we've found out through the grapevine that Lee's on a several months long mission. We need your help. Naruto took her by the hand and led her to the couch, where he leaned against the arm and Ino sat between his legs, while she stroked his tails and he scratched her ears. This was a very comfortable position for the both of them, and it settled their nerves. Ino purred and nuzzled the tails against her cheek. She simply adored her mate's fuzzy appendages. Juugo is too stiff for the Uchiha style, and Sasuke wouldn't teach him anything until he mastered the Uchiha taijutsu. He has literally nothing except what we've taught him. Karen is very flexible, but she's too flexible for anything Tsunade, Sakura, or I could teach her. My style is the basic academy taijutsu, while Sakura and Tsunade lean more toward brute strength. I need you to look into some of that knowledge you have and pull out something for them. Naruto stared up at the ceiling while scratching his wife's ears and thought hard. There were several styles that came to mind, and it wouldn't be difficult for him to teach the children. Hikaru had his own unique style and it worked for him. He wouldn't need any work, except to teach him new jutsus. He would need to see the other two in action though. He voiced this desire to Ino and she smiled before standing up. Well, follow me. The kids are downstairs practicing right now. Your guardians are really something else. Karen and Shin adore each other, although Juugo and Jin argue more often than not. The other two just lie around and try to help where they can. Jin and Penny have been teaching the kids how to play Go and Shugi, trying to get them to think with their minds more. Let's go and you'll see. Outside, the children were all sitting cross-legged on the ground, Juugo and Karen trying to keep a leaf floating above their foreheads while Hikaru had a blunted kunai floating above his. When he heard a familiar voice, he whipped his head around, losing concentration, and the kunai hit him in the forehead. It didn't register though as he flew into the arms of his father. Well, it's good to see you too, son. Have you been good for your mother? A vigorous nod came from the pinky blonde and Naruto sat him down while motioning for the children to gather round. Once everyone was settled in, Naruto knelt down to the kids' level. All right, Juugo, Karen, I've heard the two of you have problems with taijutsu. You can't seem to find a style that suits you very well. I'm hoping I can remedy that. I have a library of styles in my head and I think I can delve far enough to find one that will mess your enemies up pretty good. Juugo, you're up. Let's see what you can do against Hikaru. Juugo and Hikaru walked away from the group and set themselves into the stances they knew. Hikaru in his freeform style and Juugo in his broken Uchiha style. When Naruto dropped his hand, it was over in a matter of seconds. Hikaru decimated poor Juugo. It wasn't the boy's fault since he never had proper teaching. This caused Naruto to scowl profusely. It seemed that many clans had fallen back on the presumption that their children were born suited for the styles they taught. Hinata was a perfect example of that. He nodded his head to Juugo and the sulking boy sauntered back to sit by his guardian, who thumped his tail against the boy's back reassuringly. Naruto smiled at the gesture as Karen stood and walked forward. Karen carried herself much like his childhood friend had. She seemed unsure of herself at first, but a yip from Shin made her smile and she stood a little taller. Hikaru still decimated her, but she seemed to flow more than Juugo. It was true what Ino told him. Juugo was a staunch fighter, he more than likely was stiff because of a willingness to get in close and fight hand to hand. Karen seemed to flow like water, bending this way and that to get away from Hikaru's unorthodox fighting style. As Hikaru led the out-of-breath girl back to the circle, Naruto checked his mind for styles that would complement their body structure and mentality. Ah, there the two were. He smiled as he came out of his trance and fixed the two with a stare. If I teach you these styles, I want you to know that you can never teach them to anyone who is not family. Never use them in front of your father, he'll copy them. Never use them against each other in a malicious way. Do you understand? Juugo nodded his head, but Karen looked somewhat confused. Naruto asked her what the problem was and nearly laughed at her question. What's malicious mean? Once the adults were all through laughing and Shin had explained the definition of the word, Karen agreed never to harm any family members with her technique. Naruto nodded and formed his favorite hand sign, making 3 of himself. The clones went and stood beside their respective child, while receiving mental orders from the original. Once the information was passed, Naruto straightened up and addressed them one last time. Hikaru, my clone will be teaching you a new dotenjutsu, a defensive one. I expect you to learn it before I have to leave. Juugo, Karen, you two will be learning 2 styles that have been forgotten over the centuries. Hikaru, go on and practice while I talk to your siblings. Hikaru stood and left with the clone, Genmaki in tow. Naruto made 2 more clones and stood in the spot where the 3 children had fought. Now then, Juugo, I'm going to be teaching you an art known as Muay Thai. It concentrates on getting in close and striking with the joints, where the bone is harder. You will use your elbows, your knees, your shins, your hands, and grapples to lure your opponent in. Now watch. Naruto sized up his clone and shuffled into the Muay Thai stance, and his clone assumed his normal bestial style. They rushed at each other and Naruto thrust his palm at the clone's face. It ducked and was met with an uplifting knee, to which it dodged to the side. The clone stood and faced its maker, bending low at the waist and flexing its claws. It darted in but was met with a shin to the stomach and 2 elbows crashing down onto the back of its skull, disengaging it. Naruto turned back to the children to see them staring wide-eyed at the display. Cool. I'm going to be learning how to fight like that. Yes, but that was just a small sample. Your entire body is a weapon in Muay Thai and you will be doing certain exercises to toughen up your skin and bones. Wouldn't want the skin splitting in the middle of battle now, would we? Juugo shook his head furiously, causing a chuckle to rumble in Naruto's sea. He dismissed the boy with his clone and sent the 2 off to begin the lessons. He turned back to Karen and motioned for the other clone to join him. While it ambled over, he went back into lecture mode for the little girl. Karen, I've seen that you are very flexible and agile, especially for your age. What I'm about to teach you is more of a dance than a fighting style. However, it is very effective because it relies on constantly being in motion. While fighting in this style, the worst thing you can do is stop before the opponent is beaten. You'll spend a lot of time ducking and dodging, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Since your upper body will be weaker than most of your opponents, you'll need to focus on leg strength and being fast. Introducing kunais into this style is something else I'd like to do. Now then, let me introduce you to the art of capoeira. Once more the clone slipped into the bestial style and Naruto began to gyrate his body in unusual ways. When the clone went for a swipe, Naruto leant back and handspringed away. Keeping his body low, he waited for the clone to come at him again and tried to sweep its legs out from under it. It leapt into the air and came down with an axe kick, to which Naruto rolled to the side and leapt up, swinging a kick at its head. It ducked, and when he came down it tried to sweep kick him, only to have him stand on one hand and maneuver his feet for another kick. It ducked and was met by a headbutt that dispelled it. Naruto stood again and went back to lecture mode. Of course, that is only a small sample of the entire style. It relies on feints, subterfuge, and headbutts among other things. It's all about feeling your opponent out and moving with his movements, like a river flowing downstream. You flow with your opponent before finding your chance to strike. Not to mention that since you seem to be dancing with them, it infuriates them more often than not, leading to an easy victory once they become enraged. Now go with your instructor. Karen nodded and stood to follow the clone with stars in her eyes and Shin on her heels. Naruto smiled and turned back to Ino. Now then, where are the other two? They're at Tsunde's house, drinking tea I believe. Well, Tsunde's probably drinking sake, but that's beside the point. Why? I need to make sure that they understand not to interfere in the kids' taijutsu training. I'll write several scrolls on how to do the forms, but after that, it's up to the kids. Hikaru can help them. With that freeform style of his, he can pretty much adapt to anything and he learns better from a scroll anyway. Let's get this over with so I can do some other things. Like what? Like finding Shikamaru and setting up a shugi match between him and Penny. Ino's mouth formed an "oh" in understanding and they walked off to Tsunde's house, with their tails entwined. Tsunade sat sipping her tea while making small talk with Sakura. It was still strange to her, all the changes that had come about since her son had become a demon. She took another sip of tea and set the cup down, looking across at the pink-haired woman who was reading the paper. She remembered the brat who came into her office, begging to be made her apprentice and smiled. She remembered marrying the two she considered family and smiled more. Then she remembered how Sakura had left Naruto for the Uchiha and she unknowingly growled, causing Sakura to set her paper aside and look at her old master questioningly. Tsunade saw her out of the corner of her eye and shrugged. Just reminiscing about how some things have gone in recent years and what we could have done to make them better. Do you ever regret things in the past? Sakura took a last sip of tea and stood to put her cup in the sink. Tsunade heard her sigh. I regret a lot of things. A lot of things. But what I most regret is, hey, there's Naruto. Really? Where? He and Ino are walking this way. Should I put some more tea on? Yes, please do. I'll get Megumi and Penny from upstairs. Sakura began to fill the pot again and put it on the oven, while Tsunade made her way upstairs. A knock on the door signaled the couple's arrival and they were ushered inside. Sakura sat them down on a couch with a cup of tea in their hands as Tsunade came down the stairs followed by the two foxes. They bowed their heads to their rulers and took up stations beside the designated charges. Naruto waved at them merrily, making the two foxes sweet drop. Were kings supposed to be so flippant? I've come back as you can see. I've got the children working on taijutsu styles I know of that will be perfect for them. You can go and see them now if you wish. Penny, I need you to accompany me to find a friend of mine. Why? To fulfill our bargain when you agreed to come to the mortal realm. Tsunade shivered as she stood up. I wish you wouldn't call this world that, Naruto. It's eerie coming from you. Sorry Bar-chan, it's what it's called though. Can't change that. Doesn't mean you have to call it that in my presence. Ah well, you three go check out the kids. Penny, follow me and Ino. Shikamaru had been having yet another boring day. Doing paperwork in his office was not an ideal thing. He had hated paper tests and anything to do with writing something down since the academy days. He had been passing the time idly throwing a rubber ball at the door and catching it as it bounced back. His day got more interesting when he threw the ball one last time and it bounced off one Uzumaki Naruto's forehead, before rolling into the corner. Shikamaru took his legs off the desk and smiled at his friends. Ino, Naruto, to what do I owe the honor? Hey, that isn't Genmaki. Nope. This is Tsunade's familiar Penny. She is a master of Shugi and Go and would challenge you to a game. Shikamaru's eyebrows raised into the stratosphere. A fox playing Shugi. What an interesting development. He leaned back in his chair and eyed the fox. How can she play though? She doesn't have hands or thumbs. I pick up the pieces with my tails human. Do not act as if I am an inferior species because I lack your pitiful appendages. Ino frowned at her subordinate. Penny, be nice. Shikamaru is a friend of mine and it looks bad on the Vulpine if you are rude. I apologize Lady Ino. Forgive my insolence. Shikamaru, I, Penny, challenge you to a shugi match. One game only. If you fail to impress me, I shall go back to my realm and Lord Naruto will have to find another fox to be Lady Tsunde's familiar. These were the conditions we set down before I agreed to come here, correct? While Naruto was not happy with this development, he nodded his assent. Shikamaru sighed and stood up. Troublesome. So my enjoying a leisurely game of shugi is now about to keep you here in this realm. Tell me, how good are you? I haven't had any good opponents since Asuma's. I am an excellent player and one of the best at strategy. If you don't believe me, then try me. I have never lost a match and I don't think I'll begin by losing to a mere mortal. Now Shikamaru is not a prideful person. He's level-headed and tends to think ahead more often than not. However, he doesn't like to lose at a game unless it's to a respected opponent and doubly so if that opponent is a female. Ino saw her friend becoming annoyed and knew that this fox had struck a chord. Shikamaru stood up abruptly and walked around his desk. Well then, let's see if a lowly mortal can best a crafty kitsune. Let's do this in a place where everyone can see us play. Agreed. Several hours later, a gaping Penny was on her last leg. She had tried every strategy she could think of, but after thinking for a bit, Shikamaru was able to counter every one. The fox was now looking the board over carefully, looking for any avenue to get out of the position she found herself in. She was finding it difficult. Shikamaru was a ruthless player. Shikamaru found himself sweating it out as well. Penny was a genius, the best player he'd ever gone against. Asuma was no slouch but she put him to shame. He had had to use his pose at least 20 times over their several hours long match and it was hard to read her moves. If this were a real battlefield, she'd have had him pincered into a corner several times. He'd had to several pawns to get out of those predicaments. He looked across at his opponent and a small smirk found its way to his face. He hoped that even if he lost, she'd stay. He hadn't found an opponent like her before. Penny's grimace grew larger and larger the more she sat there. Her options were very limited. If she moved this way it was checkmate, if she moved that way it was checkmate. A human, a mere mortal, had her backed into a corner. It's been said you should never corner a fox, but this Shikamaru had her backed in and had defanged her. Bowing her head low, she bared her fangs. I concede defeat. The roar from the crowd was deafening and when the two turned they saw that there was indeed a congregation around them. They had been so caught up in the game, they hadn't noticed the throng gathering around them. Shikamaru reached across the game board and offered his hand to the fox. I don't know what your custom is for when someone wins a match but here we shake hands. I don't have hands but I can offer my tail as a substitute. That was an excellent match Shikamaru. I accept you as a rival in Shugi and I will stay here. But you have yet to prove that you can beat me in Go. Let us do this another time. I agree. Shall we say, every Tuesday at 3? That's my normal day off and that should give us plenty of time to play. Maybe we won't have such a crowd next time. Agreed. Now if you'll excuse me, I left my charge with the others. I need to be on my way. Shikamaru nodded and stood to leave. He looked toward the door where the three Vulpine were leaving and smiled. So damn troublesome. Don't know what I'd do without them though. Tsunade and Sakura, meanwhile, had been watching the children training and were, to say the least, astonished at how far they had come already. Hikaru was a given and the Doton technique he was training with was coming along nicely. Juugo was taking to Muay Thai like a fish to water. Since he wasn't strong enough to put a solid punch on the clone it had taken several blows already. He'd need to up his endurance, however, and he'd have to toughen up his body, literally. Karen, as Naruto said, flowed into her style like she was born to do it. The clone had started her off slowly, taking her through a dance that saw them try to sweep each other's legs and pirouetting on their toes to get in kicks. She was more flexible than the clone, lacking the muscle definition that it had, and landed more hits than should have been normal. Shin and Jin stood to the side, Shin bouncing up and down with unbridled joy and anticipation, hooting and hollering whenever his little mistress managed to land a hit. Jin stoically watching and analyzing, seeing what he could pick apart to make his charge a better ninja. Megumi lay to the side by Genmaki, the two talking about his children. It was hard to believe that such a group of foxes were brought together, but they had all taken to their roles with gusto. Everyone looked up when Naruto, Ino, and a sullen-looking Penny came walking into the yard. Penny strode over to Genmaki and Megumi and lay down beside them, mumbling under her breath. Genmaki smirked and nudged her with one of his tails. So Shikamaru beat you, huh? I warned you not to underestimate him. Stuff it, chew toy. Genmaki snickered at his fellow caretaker and turned his attention back to the children. He sniffed the air and edged an ear in confusion. He turned to Megumi and saw her with a smile on her face. What is that smell in the air? It's saturating it. That, my friend, is the smell of heat. It would seem that our queen is coming into her season. She's been fidgeting ever since Lord Naruto came back. If she makes it past tonight, I'd be surprised. She's got to be going crazy. Genmaki nodded his head in understanding. His wife had been insatiable when she'd come into heat. He heard chuckling beside him and quickly realizing he'd been drooling. Shaking his head, he tried to regain his dignity. I take it we should have the children stay at Sakura or Tsunade's house then. It would probably be for the best. What do you think, Penny? Hush, I'm trying to think up a strategy for my go match. The rest of the evening passed in relative silence. The children all had made progress in their training and Naruto would be able to help them the next day. Before everyone split up for the evening, Naruto took Genmaki aside. Hey, I've been meaning to ask. In summon speak, what is a few days? Roughly 3 days. Okay, at least now I know when to go back. That's a load off my mind. Wish I could figure out why Ino's so clingy though. She fidgeted a lot today and she has a very interesting smell coming off her. Do you know anything about that? Genmaki grinned and closed his eyes. I believe it would be best if I took Hikaru to Tsunade's tonight. I'll inform them not to bother the two of you and we'll eat at Ichiraku's tonight. Try to keep it down, okay? What the hell are you talking about? As Genmaki walked away, he swished his tails happily. Soon the royal family would be what it should be, a family. He turned to his king and smiled. Your mate is in heat, Lord Naruto. I believe you have a rough time ahead of you. Enjoyable but rough. If you thought she was bad normally, you have no idea what's in store. Naruto's eyes widened and the fear was evident. But, she nearly came me normally. What do I do? Pray that Kami loves you. Naruto whimpered when he heard Ino call him. With a last look over his shoulder to the retreating Genmaki, he headed towards his doom. Ino had been feeling hot all day. She couldn't explain it, but whenever she looked at Naruto, she had an irresistible urge to jump him right then and there. As he said his last goodbyes to Genmaki for the evening, she headed inside the house. Before he made it inside, she had bolted all the doors and windows, and once he was inside, she locked the deadbolt with a sharp clack. Naruto froze when he heard that sound. He slowly pivoted on his heel to see a heavily panting Ino, with a glazed look in her eye. He backed away slowly as she stalked her prey. He couldn't deny, however, that the pheromone she was emitting was intoxicating. As she slid across the floor toward him, the feeling of fear and excitement built even more, and he totally lost it when she spoke in a sultry voice, her tails waving wildly, her ears pinned back, as she crouched before springing. Here Foxy, Foxy, come to Mama. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.